In this video, I am going to provide you with some of the problems I ran into when calling for a framing inspection. And one of those things will be the fact that you are not ready for the inspection. Now, don't be confused with a roof sheathing inspection. You don't need to call for a framing inspection if you're not ready, but if you want to cover the house with your roofing paper, then you can call for a roof sheathing inspection. But you can't call for a framing inspection unless all of your windows are in, the fireplace in this case, along with the plumbing, electrical, heating, and air conditioning ducts, and even the exterior doors. And there's a reason why I put this at the front of the video, and that's because I think it's the most important tip I could provide you with in this video. Next on the list, make sure that the plumbers, electricians, or the heating and air conditioning folks haven't drilled any oversized holes or cut any notches in any of the structural lumber that could create a problem for the framing inspection. Now, as we can see here, they have taken what looks to be like a chainsaw, and I've seen this done plenty of times, and cut what appears to be some heavy-duty structural framing plates. And by looking at this piece here looks like it's less than 2 feet wide. And I'm simply basing this off of the 16-inch on center spacing for the wall framing studs. And something like this might require a fix from the structural engineer, because the first strap is going to go to about here, and then this way 4 feet. And then you're not going to be able to get something from here going this way. So this might require a 6-foot strap. However, I wouldn't want to be the person who nailed the strap on and then had to remove it and then possibly remove some of the framing because it's all split. And for some of you, you're probably even thinking, well, why not put a 4-foot strap on this side and then go to the other side of the wall and then put a 4-foot strap on the other side? And to that, I would say clever. But what if the engineer doesn't want that many nails in this section of the wall framing? So again, something to think about before you call for the framing inspection. Next up on the list would be to take the building plans and go around the entire project to make sure that the correct building hardware was used and installed correctly. And for whatever reason, I have a hard time believing that this strap right here was going to work because it's a thinner strap than I'm used to seeing coming off of a 3x plate. And I'm even going to speculate that this strap, even if it was approved, should have been used to connect the two top plates together or moved up. And if you have a 2-story house, you will need to consider the stairway. And for this particular house here, the stairway has a couple of problems with the structural connections. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details about their problems because there's usually not enough information on the building plans to show how all of this stuff connects together. However, I am going to provide you with a couple of building code problems that your building inspector might not like. And one of them will be whether or not your stairs encroach into the minimum distance on a landing, or even, as we will see here in a few seconds, in a hallway. Another thing you should check will be the individual riser height along with the depth of the treads to make sure that they are all the same size. Now, the biggest problem area you're going to run into on a set of stairs is usually going to be at the top or at the bottom steps where the stair builder might have miscalculated something. And if that is the case, then the stairway might need to be removed and rebuilt. Now, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you're going to have a problem where the stairway is sticking into the minimum width of a hallway. And if that is the case, then the stairway is going to have to be redesigned. And sometimes it's going to be the architect or the engineer's fault because they might have a beam in the way or the architect miscalculated some of the measurements. And I've seen this myself personally. And last but not least, with our stairway, we need to talk about the guardrail, which needs to have a minimum height in most cases of 42 inches. And that would be measured from the top of the finished floor to the top of the guardrail. So not only will it include walls like this that are sitting on top of the floor above, it will also include the walls that are attached to the stairway. Or should I say the walls that would be protecting people from falling off of the stairway. And of course, another problem you could run into will be any changes or modifications made by your construction workers. And even something like this could be a problem for the structural engineer. For example, if he needed a 10-foot overall length on this particular shear wall to provide him with the bare minimum required by the local building department, and you move it 2 inches in or 1.5 inches, then it could be a problem. I'm not suggesting it is going to be a problem, but these are problems that you need to be aware of. And trust me, I've seen plenty of them that have created plenty of problems for the building inspectors. Even something like this, where the structural engineer drew these pieces of building hardware in, and of course they needed to be installed, and somehow created a problem for the stair builder. And I don't think something like this is going to be difficult to fix. However, it might require what I'm going to talk about next, and this is going to depend upon the building inspector, or the mood of the building inspector, or whether the building inspector likes you or not. The fact that they might require some type of paperwork with a stamp on it from the structural engineer for any changes from any modifications or alterations that a construction worker might have made that isn't already on the building plans. Like this toilet here, where it looked like it was in the way of the double joist, and you can see here where the layout marks are on the glue lam beam. So at one time the double joist went through and connected to the beam, but now we'll definitely need the approval of a structural engineer and a detailed drawing of how to make this repair. And for those of you wondering just exactly how big of a deal something like this is, well, I can tell you from experience that it's usually going to cost somebody a lot of money, and in some cases it can hold the job up. I remember one time working on a project where my dad was building a custom home next to another framing contractor who was building another home, and all of a sudden we didn't see any more work going on. And one day I decided to go over there and just kind of look around and notice that they had notched a glue lam beam for a gas pipe. And then within a few weeks we found out why nobody was working on that job, and I'm guessing it took about a month before people started working on that project again. And of course, another problem you could have is if you use the wrong building materials. I mean, if you don't want to have any problems with the building department, structural engineer, or architect, then why take it upon yourself to make any modifications to anything on the building plans? And another thing, if you're not building a piano, look out for the concrete contractor and move this over a little bit and line your column up with the edge of the concrete. Another concern for using the wrong materials will be to check all of the floor sheathing, roof sheathing, and the wall sheathing, along with your structural shear panel, to make sure that it's all the right size and grade, and make sure that it's all nailed correctly and with the right nails. Another common problem, and even though I can't see it, there might be an anchor bolt here. However, I doubt it, because there's a pin here someone drove in. That probably isn't doing anything, especially if it's the same pin that's used for the 2x plates. Just don't forget that you need an anchor bolt located within 12 inches from every framing plate break on the exterior walls. And most of the time, a hold down is not going to replace an anchor bolt. Now, don't ask me why, because it sure seems like it should. Next up on our framing inspection checklist will be any type of fire blocks or draft stopping. And this stairway provides us with an excellent example of how the fire blocks were installed correctly, even around the landing. Now let's take a look at a fireplace chimney draft stop. And when completed, there will be a round pipe for the chimney coming through this hole with a square piece of metal surrounding it to block off the draft stop. And of course, the draft stops and fire blocks are used to reduce or eliminate the amount of fresh air that can be drawn into a fire and reduce the possibility of a fire entering into the area above the blocks. And even though it doesn't look like this is blocked, there's a good chance it's blocked from below. And you can see a good example of that by looking at the one here going into the ceiling of the second floor. Another problem you could run into, and these aren't always going to be easy to find if you don't know a lot about construction, because it might not always be on the building plans. However, if your building inspector does know a little bit about construction, then it could be a big problem. And that, of course, would be any structural load-bearing beams that are going to be transferring weight from above to the wall framing. Might require more than one trimmer on each side, or even a 4x4 post. And on this particular project, I found about 4 problems like this. And even though this might not be a problem, it seems to be a bigger problem when you have a girder truss sitting over a window or a door header that might be a 4x6 when it really needs to be a 4x12 or larger. So girder trusses are definitely things to look out for whenever you see them sitting over any type of an opening. And of course, the last tip I want to provide you with to keep everyone safe will be to clean up the job site. And I'm not about to suggest this will always help with your inspection, but it's something I made a habit of doing after working for a contractor who swore up and down that it did make a difference. So hopefully you learned at least one thing from this video, and if you did, hit the thumbs up button. And if you didn't, just hit the thumbs up button anyway. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment area, and I will answer them as soon as possible.